My name is Emily Carter. I'm 36 years old, and 4 years ago, my own mother erased me from the family. Not quietly, not privately. She wrote it in a group chat with my brother, my sister, and the rest of the family. Her exact words were, "Emily chose to be a lowly teacher. I no longer consider her my daughter." No argument, no explanation. Just like that. I was gone, removed from the family chat, removed from family dinners, removed from their lives as if I had never existed. I didn't beg. I didn't defend myself. I simply disappeared. What my mother didn't know, what none of them knew, was that 4 years later, I would be standing inside the North Carolina State Capitol in front of more than 500 educators, while the governor shook my hand and called my name. And sitting right there in the audience was the same family who once told the world I wasn't worth claiming. They came dressed in their best clothes, smiling for the cameras, expecting to walk on stage with me, expecting to share the moment. But what happened next, when my mother stood up in the middle of my speech, is something no one in that room will ever forget. Before I tell you how it all unfolded, take a moment to subscribe to the channel if stories like this speak to you. That way, if life gets busy, you won't miss the next story about family truth and the moment karma finally arrives. And let me ask you something. Have you ever had someone in your own family treat you like an embarrassment simply because you chose a different path in life? If you have, you may understand exactly why I did what I did that day on that stage. But to understand the moment my mother's smile disappeared in front of 500 people, we need to go back to the night she decided I was no longer her daughter. If you had asked anyone in our neighborhood about the Carter family, they would have said we were the definition of success. We lived in a quiet suburb outside Raleigh, the kind of place where lawns were trimmed twice a week and neighbors waved politely while walking their dogs. My mother loved that neighborhood. She said it reflected the kind of family we were. My mother, Linda Carter, had built her entire life around reputation. She had spent 15 years climbing the social ladder at the Oak Ridge Country Club. She organized charity luncheons, chaired the holiday gala committee, and knew exactly which fork to use at every dinner table. To her, appearances weren't just important, they were everything. My older brother Jason made her proud in the most obvious way possible. He was a corporate attorney in Charlotte, expensive suits, corner office, the kind of job title my mother loved repeating to anyone who would listen. "Jason works with major clients," she would say casually, as if that sentence alone proved she had succeeded as a parent. Then there was my sister Rebecca. Rebecca was a dermatologist with her own practice in downtown Raleigh. Her social media was filled with photos of pristine offices, luxury skincare products, and smiling patients with perfect skin. Whenever Rebecca visited for holidays, my mother would introduce her like she was royalty. "My daughter, the doctor," she would say, placing a proud hand on Rebecca's arm. And then there was me, the youngest, the quiet one, the one who didn't quite fit the story my mother wanted to tell. I was a 4th grade teacher at a small public elementary school about 40 miles away. My car was 8 years old. My apartment was small. And my salary, well, let's just say it wasn't the kind of number that impressed anyone at a country club dinner. But I didn't choose teaching because it was easy. I chose it because I loved it. There is something powerful about watching a child learn to read for the first time. The moment their eyes light up, when letters suddenly become words, and words become stories. That feeling meant more to me than any job title ever could. Unfortunately, my mother didn't see it that way. To her, teaching wasn't noble. It was embarrassing. She never said those exact words out loud in public. My mother was far too polished for that. But the message was always there, hiding behind her smile. I started noticing it during family gatherings. The first time it really stung was Thanksgiving. Our dining room table was large enough for 8 people, but that year, My mother had added a small folding table in the corner for the kids. When I arrived, she handed me my plate and gestured toward that smaller table. "Oh, Emily," she said sweetly, "why don't you sit over there? You're so good with children." I was 32 years old. I sat next to my cousin's 8-year-old twins, while the rest of the family ate at the main table. No one objected. Not my brother, not my sister, not my father. They simply continued their conversation about investment properties and medical conferences, while I helped the twins cut their turkey. It was a small thing, but small things add up. Christmas. That same year brought another moment I couldn't quite forget. I had spent weeks knitting a soft gray scarf for my mother. She always said gray matched everything in her wardrobe, and I wanted to give her something personal. When she opened the box, she smiled politely. "Oh, handmade," she said. She held it up for exactly 3 seconds before setting it aside. A few minutes later, Rebecca handed her a designer handbag. My mother gasped with excitement. She spent 10 full minutes admiring the stitching, the leather, the brand name embossed on the clasp. The scarf disappeared into the coat closet before the night was over. But the moment that truly told me where I stood happened a few months later. It was my mother's birthday. I called her that afternoon to ask what time dinner started. There was a brief pause on the phone. "Oh, Emily," she said finally, her voice careful. The restaurant only had 6 seats available. 6 seats. My parents, Jason and his wife, Rebecca and her fiancé. 6 seats. And somehow, there was no room for me. "You understand, don't you?" my mother added quickly. "Family comes first." I remember staring at the wall of my apartment after that call ended. Family comes first. Apparently, I wasn't family anymore. But even after all of that, I still didn't realize just how far my mother was willing to go to erase me. That realization came on a quiet Saturday night when my cousin Rachel called me with a trembling voice and said something that made my stomach drop. "Emily," she whispered, "I think you need to check the family group chat." When Rachel told me to check the family group chat, I opened WhatsApp without thinking. The Carter family thread had been active for years. Holidays, birthdays, photos of dinners I sometimes attended and sometimes didn't. But when I searched for it that night, it wasn't there. At first, I thought my phone was glitching. I refreshed the app. Still nothing. "Rachel, I don't see it," I said slowly. There was a long pause on the other end of the call. "That's because you're not in it anymore," she said quietly. The words didn't register right away. "What do you mean I'm not in it?" Another pause. Then my phone buzzed. Rachel had sent me a screenshot. I opened the image, and the moment I read the message, the room seemed to go silent around me. The message had been sent by my mother at 8:14 p.m. Her name sat there at the top of the screen, Linda Carter. Under it, in plain text, were the words that would change everything. Reminder, Mother's Day dinner, tomorrow at 7 p.m. Then the next line, all my children will be there. Another line followed, all my successful children. My chest tightened. And then I saw the final sentence. Emily chose to be a lowly teacher. I no longer consider her my daughter. Please don't bring up her name tomorrow. I read the message once, then twice, then a third time. Each time, hoping somehow the words would rearrange themselves into something less cruel. They didn't. Rachel's voice broke through the silence. "I'm so sorry, Emily," she whispered. "Your mom asked Rebecca to remove you from the group chat earlier tonight." I swallowed hard. Did anyone say anything?" Rachel didn't answer immediately. Instead, another screenshot appeared on my phone. Rebecca had responded first. A single red heart emoji. That was it. A heart. As if my mother had just shared a cute photo instead of disowning her daughter. Below that message was my brother Jason's reply. 2 words. "Understood, Mom." I stared at the screen for a long time. There were other family members in the chat. Aunts, uncles, cousins, but no one questioned it. No one defended me. Not a single person typed the words, "That's not right." Rachel finally spoke again. "I shouldn't have sent it, but I thought you deserved to know." "You did the right thing," I said quietly. And I meant it, because as painful as those messages were, they also gave me something important: clarity. For years, I had wondered if I was imagining the distance between me and my family, if maybe I was being too sensitive, if maybe my mother just didn't understand my choices. But that screenshot erased every doubt. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a decision. My mother had looked at my life, my career, the things that mattered to me, and decided I was an embarrassment. I sat on the edge of my bed for a long time that night, staring at my phone in the dim light of my apartment. Rachel eventually said goodnight. The call ended, but I didn't sleep. I kept rereading that message, not because I didn't believe it, but because part of me still hoped there might be some hidden explanation buried between the lines. There wasn't. Around 2 in the morning, I finally set my phone down and made a decision. I wasn't going to call my mother. I wasn't going to argue with my siblings. And I certainly wasn't going to show up at that Mother's Day dinner pretending nothing had happened. If my mother wanted me gone, then I would give her exactly what she asked for. But I would do it on my terms. The next morning, while the rest of my family gathered for brunch at a restaurant I wasn't invited to, I made coffee in my small kitchen and opened my phone one last time. First, I blocked my mother's number, then Rebecca's, then Jason's. It took less than 30 seconds. After that, I deleted my social media accounts. No Instagram, no Facebook, no way for me to see their perfect family photos, or for them to monitor my life. I didn't send a goodbye message. I didn't leave a dramatic explanation. I simply disappeared. For the first time in years, the silence felt peaceful. But what I didn't realize then, what I couldn't possibly have predicted, was that my disappearance would last 4 years. And during those 4 years, something strange happened. While my family was busy pretending I didn't exist, my mother began telling people a very different story about me. According to her, I hadn't been disowned. No, apparently, I had moved overseas. Rachel told me about it months later during one of our occasional phone calls. Your mom told everyone at the country club that you're doing humanitarian work in Peru, she said. I actually laughed when I heard that. Peru. I hadn't even left North Carolina. In fact, I was still teaching at the exact same school, just 40 miles away. That's when I realized something. My mother didn't just want me gone. She wanted a version of me she could be proud of. And the real me, the teacher who loved her students more than status, didn't fit the story she wanted to tell. But the truth is, those 4 years my family spent pretending I was gone turned out to be the most important years of my life. Because that was the time I finally built a family that actually wanted me. For the first few months after I cut contact with my family, life felt strangely quiet. No tense holiday dinners, no awkward phone calls with my mother, no subtle reminders that my career, somehow, made me less valuable than my siblings. Just silence. At first, that silence felt lonely. But slowly, something unexpected began to happen. Without the constant pressure of trying to earn my family's approval, I started focusing on the things that had always mattered to me: my students, my classroom, the small victories that came from helping a child believe in themselves. One afternoon that fall, our school organized a field trip to a local farm just outside town. It was meant to teach the kids about agriculture and where their food actually came from. The farm was called Brooks Family Fields. 50 acres of rolling land, apple trees, pumpkin patches, and a weathered red barn that had probably stood there for decades. When our school bus pulled up, a tall man in a denim jacket was waiting by the gate. He had sun-worn hands, muddy boots, and the kindest eyes I had ever seen. "Welcome to the farm," he said with an easy smile. His name was Daniel Brooks. Daniel owned the farm with his younger brother. But the moment I noticed most that day didn't involve the vegetables or the apple orchard. It involved a little girl standing quietly beside him. She couldn't have been older than 6. Curly brown hair, freckles across her nose, and a shy expression that reminded me of many of my students. "This is my daughter, Sophie," Daniel said. Sophie gave me a small wave. Later that afternoon, while the children were feeding goats and running through rows of pumpkins, Sophie stayed close to me. She asked thoughtful questions about everything. Why leaves changed color? Why bees liked certain flowers? Why reading books made people smarter? When the trip ended, Daniel walked me back toward the bus. Sophie doesn't usually warm up to people that quickly, he said. She must really like you. I smiled. She's a bright kid. Daniel hesitated for a moment. Would you maybe consider tutoring her after school sometimes? I looked down at Sophie, who was now holding a small pumpkin, like it was treasure. What for? I asked gently. Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. Her mom passed away last year, he said quietly. Cancer. The words settled between us. She used to read with Sophie every night. Since she's been gone, Sophie hasn't really wanted to open a book. I knelt down beside Sophie. Would you like to read stories together sometimes? I asked. She looked at me carefully, then nodded. That was how it started. Twice a week after school, I drove out to the farm. At first, we just read simple books, then chapter books. Then Sophie began asking questions about everything. Dinosaurs, stars, why people cry when they miss someone. Those afternoons became the best part of my week. Over time, Daniel and I started talking more too. Sometimes over coffee in the farmhouse kitchen while Sophie finished her homework. Sometimes while watching the sunset stretch across the fields. Daniel wasn't impressed by job titles. He didn't care about salaries. He cared about things like kindness, integrity, showing up for the people you love. It was a completely different world from the one I had grown up in. 2 years later, Daniel and I stood beneath a large oak tree at the edge of the farm. It was a small wedding. No fancy venue, no hundreds of guests, just a few close friends, a warm summer breeze, and Sophie scattering flower petals with absolute seriousness. That same year, I officially adopted her. The day the paperwork became final, Sophie ran into the living room, holding a drawing she had made. 3 stick figures, holding hands under a bright yellow sun. Above them, she had written in careful block letters, my mom, my dad, and me. I still keep that drawing in my desk drawer. Around that time, something else was changing in my life too. After years of teaching 4th grade, I had started taking evening classes to earn my master's degree in educational leadership. It wasn't easy. Many nights, I stayed up past midnight, writing papers, while Daniel fixed tractors in the barn. But eventually, the hard work paid off. When the position of assistant principal opened at my school, I applied. And to my surprise, I got the job. My life felt full in a way it never had before. A loving husband, a daughter who ran into my arms every afternoon, a career that allowed me to help even more students. And during all of it, my old family remained completely absent. They had no idea what my life had become. But that changed one spring morning, when a phone call arrived that none of us expected. A phone call that would eventually bring my past crashing back into my present. Because the voice on the other end of that call said something that made my heart skip a beat. Emily Carter, this is the North Carolina Department of Education. And what they said next would change everything. The call from the Department of Education came on a quiet Thursday afternoon. I was sitting in my office, reviewing lesson reports, when my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. Normally, I let unknown calls go to voicemail. But something about that moment made me answer. Hello, this is Emily Carter. A professional voice replied, Mrs. Carter, this is Angela Whitmore from the North Carolina Department of Education. I sat up a little straighter. Yes, we're calling to inform you that the board has reviewed your nomination, and you've been selected as this year's State Educator of the Year. For a moment, I didn't say anything. The words seemed to float in the air between us. Educator of the Year, across the entire state. Are you sure I finally managed? Angela laughed softly. Your results speak for themselves. Your literacy program has improved reading scores across 3 counties. Your mentorship program for new teachers is now being studied statewide. She paused. The award ceremony will be held next month at the North Carolina State Capitol. The governor will be presenting the honor personally. When the call ended, I just sat there staring at my desk. It wasn't the award itself that overwhelmed me. It was the realization that the work I had poured my heart into for 15 years had been seen, recognized. Later that evening, Daniel and Sophie celebrated with me at the kitchen table. Daniel opened a bottle of sparkling cider. Sophie insisted on making a banner that said "Go Mom" in bright purple marker. It was one of the happiest nights of my life. But 3 days later, my phone buzzed with a message from someone I hadn't heard from in months. "Rachel, Emily," she wrote, "you might want to call me." I stepped outside onto the porch and dialed her number. Rachel answered immediately. "You're not going to believe what just happened," she said. My stomach tightened. "What?" "Your sister posted an article about your award in the family group chat." I felt a strange chill run through me. "What did my mother say?" Rachel hesitated. "Nothing yet, but she called Rebecca the second she saw it. I overheard the conversation when I was visiting Aunt Patricia." And Rachel let out a breath. "She's furious." "Furious," I repeated, "because she's been telling everyone at the country club for 4 years that you were living overseas doing charity work. Now the article proves you've been here the whole time." I leaned against the porch railing. Of course, the lie had finally caught up with her. But that wasn't the end of it. 3 days later, I received an email. The subject line read simply, "From Mom." I stared at the screen for a long time before opening it. "My dear Emily," the message began, "I saw the wonderful news about your award. I always knew you had potential. Your father and I are so proud of you." No apology, no mention of the message she had sent 4 years earlier, just pride, suddenly appearing out of nowhere. Then came the part that made my chest tighten. The whole family would love to attend the ceremony and celebrate together. It would mean so much to stand beside you during such an important moment. I closed the email without replying. A few days later, Rachel called again. This time, her voice sounded even more uneasy. "Emily, there's something else." "What is it?" "I just saw new messages in the group chat." My heart sank. "What messages?" Rachel read them out loud. First was my mother. "Wonderful news. Emily's ceremony will be televised. We should arrive early and sit in the family section." Then Rebecca replied, "I'll bring flowers." Jason wrote next, "Good publicity for the family." Good publicity. Not a single message asked how I felt. Not one person wondered if I wanted them there. They had simply decided. They were going to show up, pose for photos, stand on stage beside me, and pretend they had supported me all along. When Rachel finished reading the messages, the line went quiet. Finally, she asked softly, "What are you going to do?" I thought about it for a long time. I could call the event organizers and have my family removed from the guest list. I could confront my mother before the ceremony and force her to apologize. But then I realized something. If I did that, she would simply tell everyone the same story she had always told, that I was dramatic, ungrateful, difficult. So instead, I made a different decision. "I'm not stopping them," I told Rachel. "You're not?" she asked, surprised. "Number." I looked out at the fields stretching behind our farmhouse. "They can come." Rachel hesitated. "Emily, what are you planning?" I smiled slowly. "I'm going to do exactly what they've always asked me to do." "What does that mean?" "It means," I said calmly, "that when I stand on that stage, I'm going to tell the truth." And the truth, I suspected, was about to make my mother wish she had never walked into that room. The morning of the ceremony arrived with a quiet kind of calm. Not the nervous calm before something terrible. The steady calm that comes when you already know who you are. Daniel drove us to the North Carolina State Capitol just after sunrise. The white columns of the building stretched high into the sky, glowing in the early light. I had seen pictures of the Capitol before, but standing in front of it that morning felt different. It felt significant. Inside the chamber had been prepared for the ceremony. Rows of chairs filled the floor. Teachers, principals, and school board members from across the state slowly found their seats. Nearly 500 people. Television cameras had been set up along the walls. A long banner hung behind the stage with the words, "North Carolina State Educator of the Year," and beneath it, my name, Emily Carter. Sophie sat between Daniel and me in the front row, swinging her feet because they didn't quite reach the floor. Her yellow dress had small daisies stitched along the collar. She had insisted on wearing it because she said it looked happy. "Mom," she whispered, tugging my sleeve, "is that really your name up there?" I followed her gaze to the banner and smiled. "Yes, sweetheart, that's my name." Just then, I felt something shift in the room behind me. Voices, movement, and then I heard a voice I hadn't heard in 4 years. "Well, there she is. My mother." I didn't turn around, but I didn't need to. Her voice had always carried a certain confidence, the tone of someone who believed every room belonged to her. From the corner of my eye, I could see them entering the chamber. My mother in a cream-colored jacket, pearls resting neatly at her collar. Rebecca in a bright red dress that looked like it had been chosen specifically for cameras. Jason in a tailored charcoal suit. They took seats in the second row directly behind us, close enough to be seen, close enough to be photographed. I heard my mother whisper proudly to the woman sitting next to her, "That's my daughter up there." The words floated through the air like they belonged to someone else's story. Because 4 years earlier, she had told the world I was no longer her daughter. The ceremony began a few minutes later. One by one, speakers approached the podium to talk about education community and the importance of teachers. Finally, the host announced the final award of the morning. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the North Carolina State Educator of the Year." My name echoed across the chamber. Emily Carter. The room filled with applause as I stood and walked toward the stage. The governor shook my hand warmly and handed me the award. Then he stepped aside. The microphone waited. I took a slow breath and looked out across the audience. Hundreds of faces looked back at me. Teachers who had dedicated their lives to helping children. People who understood what this work really meant. And somewhere behind me, my old family waited for their moment. I began speaking. When I first became a teacher 15 years ago, I didn't know if I would last a full year. A few soft laughs moved through the crowd. The hours were long, the pay was modest, and some people believed teaching wasn't a career worth celebrating. The room grew quiet, but what I discovered is that teaching isn't about recognition. It's about showing up every day for children who need someone to believe in them. I paused for a moment, and that brings me to the people I want to thank. I looked down toward the front row, my husband Daniel, who has supported every long night and every difficult day. Daniel gave me a small nod. And my daughter Sophie, who reminds me every day why the work we do matters. Sophie waved shyly from her seat. I smiled. Then I finished the sentence. "And that is my family." Silence. For a brief moment, the entire chamber seemed to hold its breath. Behind me, I heard the sudden scrape of a chair. Then my mother's voice rang out across the room. "Emily." I turned slowly. My mother was standing. Her expression carried a forced smile, the kind meant for cameras. "Surely you didn't forget your own mother," she said loudly. Several people in the audience turned their heads. My mother began walking toward the stage steps. "I would just love to say a few words about how proud Mrs. Carter." My voice stopped her. The microphone carried my words clearly through the chamber. She froze on the first step. I looked at her calmly. 4 years ago, I said gently, "you sent a message to our entire family." My mother's smile flickered. "In that message," I continued, "you said that because I chose to be a teacher, you no longer considered me your daughter." A ripple of shocked whispers spread through the audience. "I've simply honored the decision you made." The silence lasted only a second. Then someone in the back of the chamber began to clap. Another person stood, then another. Within moments, hundreds of educators were on their feet. 500 people, applauding, not for revenge, but for something far simpler, for the truth. And as the sound of that applause filled the room, I realized something that had taken me years to understand. The people standing in that chamber had just given me something my own mother never could. Respect. If you step back from Emily's story and look at it through the lens of family psychology, something important becomes clear. What happened between Emily and her mother wasn't really about teaching. It wasn't about money. It wasn't even about success. It was about fear. Many parents, especially those who grew up in environments where love was tied to achievement, begin to see their children's lives as reflections of themselves. When a child chooses a path that doesn't fit the image they want to present to the world, that parent can experience it almost like a personal failure. In those moments, some people make a tragic choice. They protect their reputation instead of protecting their relationship. Emily's mother didn't reject her because Emily lacked value. She rejected her because Emily's life challenged the story she wanted others to believe about herself. And that's something many families quietly struggle with. But here's the deeper lesson in Emily's story. Emily didn't respond with rage. She didn't try to destroy her family's reputation. Instead, she did something far more powerful. She built a life where respect was no longer conditional. A husband who valued kindness. A daughter who loved her without judgment. A career built on purpose rather than prestige. When she stood on that stage, the applause wasn't just for a teacher receiving an award. It was for a woman who had finally learned the difference between approval and self-worth. And sometimes that difference changes everything. Now I'd like to ask you something. Have you ever had to choose between keeping the peace in your family and protecting your own peace of mind? If Emily's story resonated with you, take a moment to share your thoughts in the comments. Stories like this remind people that they're not alone. And if you enjoy thoughtful stories about family karma and the complicated ways people learn to grow, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. There are many more stories ahead, because sometimes the most powerful lessons about family come from the moments when we finally learn what real family truly means.